Welcome back, friends. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been around someone who just feels different? Like there's something behind them? Like they've got company you can't quite see? Maybe you've met someone who works with some ancient deity you barely remember from mythology class. Hecate, Kali, the Morrigan. And they just talk about her like she's a friend they text on weekends. Or maybe you've been doing some reading, some astral work, some journeying, and you've encountered what felt like a spirit guide, something that showed up to point you in a direction. Or maybe, and this one hits close to home for a lot of us, you felt the presence of someone you lost, a grandparent, someone who was beloved, someone who didn't leave when they were supposed to. If you're sitting here wondering whether you have to work with deities, ancestors, or spirit guides in order to be a real witch or pagan, if you feel left out because you haven't had some big divine calling, or, on the flip side, if something has been tugging at you and you don't know what to do with it, this video is for you. Hi, I'm Jen, and I'm an atheist witch. That simply means that I don't worship godlike deities. It doesn't necessarily mean that I think they don't exist or aren't real in some meaningful way. That is a nuanced distinction that we will get into. And if you've been here for a minute, you probably already know that I speak to dead people. Now, before you picture something dramatic, it doesn't work like what you see on TV. No, I cannot just call up your grandparent who passed, or insert celebrity here. Those do happen occasionally, but it isn't anything on my end that I'm aware of. I'm not going to tell you that I have someone there for you, and their name starts with C, for example. I'm not pulling ancient wisdom out of the ether on command. What I can tell you is, yes, your grandmother misses you. And yes, she is so proud of you. Today, we're going to break down each of these three types of entities: deities, spirit guides, and ancestors. We're going to talk about what they are, why people work with them, how you might find the ones that resonate with you, and most importantly, whether you actually have to engage with them at all. This conversation is going to be nuanced. There are no simple yes or no answers here, and I think that makes the conversation a little more interesting. So settle in. Let's get into it. Before we can answer the big question, do you need to work with these beings? We need to get clear on who and what we are actually discussing, because these are three very different types of entities. So let's break them down. Deities are gods, goddesses, and demigods drawn from mythology and ancient religious traditions. Every culture on earth has them, and I do mean every single one. You've got your ancient Greek and Roman pantheons: Zeus, Aphrodite, Hecate, Persephone, Hades. You've got your Norse deities: Odin, Freya, Thor, Loki. Celtic traditions have the Morrigan, Brigid, Cernunnos. There are Hindu gods and goddesses like Kali and Vishnu, indigenous beings like Corn Mother. Chinese and Japanese traditions have rich pantheons of their own. And the African diaspora, filled with deities that made their way into Caribbean culture via, you guessed it, the transatlantic slave trade. And yes, this conversation can include the Christian God, the big G, the abstract dude in the sky. I know that for a lot of us in these spaces, there's religious trauma woven into that figure, and I want to honor that. So we will treat this one carefully. But theologically speaking, if we are talking about a deity structure, that one does count. Spirit guides are something different. Think of them less as powerful ancient beings and more like tour guides. They're entities who exist to help you navigate, to point you toward your path, to show up when you're at a crossroads, to nudge you when you're going the wrong direction. They tend to be more personal than deities. Your spirit guide probably isn't on 1,000 other people's altars. Spirit guides are also what many people are referring to when they talk about guardian angels, and angels in general, actually. Personally, I don't work with angels. That's my own religious baggage, and that has to be okay. But if the concept of angelic guides resonates with you, lean into it. That is a completely valid guideline. Ha, see what I did there? Ancestors. Now this one gets a little weird, in the best way possible. Ancestors are those who came before you. And here's where it gets interesting. They don't necessarily have to be your direct biological lineage, although they often are. You can work with the ancestors of a tradition you have adopted, a land you live on, a craft you have inherited. That said, I'll share something that made me laugh when I first heard it because there's real truth in it. White people will appeal to any ancestors except their own. We'll work with Celtic goddesses, Greek heroes, Norse gods. But ask someone to connect with their actual great-great-grandmother from Bavaria or County Cork, and suddenly it gets awkward. We'll come back to that. I want to address this now, so it's not hanging over the rest of the conversation. If you are not from the tradition or the region where a deity originates, that does not automatically mean that they are inaccessible to you. Deities, particularly the ones who have been worked with openly for centuries, often call to people across cultural lines. That is real, and it should not be dismissed easily. However, there is a difference between being called to something and just picking deities like their Pokemon cards. If you are working with a deity or spirit from a tradition that belongs to a living, marginalized culture, indigenous traditions, African diasporic traditions, South Asian traditions, do me a solid and bring some extra reverence. Do your research. Ask whether that tradition is open or closed. Ask the deity themselves for guidance. And if someone from that tradition tells you that what you're doing is harmful, listen to them. This isn't about gatekeeping. It's about respect. And in my experience, the deities who genuinely want to work with you will make that clear. And the ones who don't will make that clear too. All right, let's talk about deities specifically, because this is where most beginners get tripped up. When you're new to this path, you'll often see advice like, find your deity, or your deity will find you. And it can feel like there's some cosmic assignment that you're supposed to get, and if you haven't gotten it, you're doing something wrong. Here is the reality. Some people do experience a clear, unmistakable calling from a specific deity. It comes in dreams, in repeated signs, in a felt sense that something is reaching back when you reach out. That is real, and it does happen. But plenty of witches and pagans work perfectly well without a patron deity, and plenty of others work with deities in a more casual, task-specific way. Not as a devotional relationship, but more like consulting an expert. A lot of beginners gravitate toward Pan, the Greek demigod of the wild, music, and nature. And yes, the one with the goat legs and the flute. He's playful, he's accessible, and he tends to be pretty forgiving of fumbling beginners. If you're just starting out and you feel drawn to that wild, almost hedonistic energy, Pan is a good place to start. Hecate is probably the most discussed deity in modern witchcraft spaces. She's the goddess of the crossroads, of liminal spaces, of magic itself. People typically come to Hecate when they are at a major turning point, leaving a relationship, changing careers, shedding an old identity. She's not a casual deity. She will help you transform, but she's not going to hold your hand while you resist it. If you are feeling called to Hecate, it probably means that you're being asked to make a hard choice. And I would encourage you to go toward it. Other deities that come up a lot, Aphrodite for love, beauty, and self-worth. Persephone for cycles of death and rebirth, and for anyone doing underworld work. Hades for the shadow work and the mysteries of death. The Morrigan, and she's my personal favorite, for sovereignty, battle, and radical honesty with yourself. Norse practitioners often work with Freya for love and war, Odin for wisdom and sacrifice, and Loki for transformation and chaos, although Loki does require a real sense of humor. True story. Hathor from the Egyptian tradition for joy, music, and feminine power. Kali from the Hindu tradition for destruction of ego and fierce liberation. The thing that most of these have in common is that people seek out deities based on what those deities do, what they're associated with. If you're going through a breakup, you might want to work with Aphrodite to heal your relationship with love itself, or the Morrigan to reclaim your sense of self. If you're facing a major life decision, Hecate will meet you at the crossroads. You don't have to be in a full devotional relationship with a deity to ask for their help. If you choose to pursue that devotional relationship, though, the rewards are definitely worth the effort, in my opinion. Spirit guides are, in my experience, the most personally intimate of these three categories. and the hardest to talk about publicly because they are so specific to you. Your spirit guide is not a figure out of a mythology textbook. They might appear as an ancestor. They might appear as an animal, what some traditions call a power animal or a totem. They might appear as something that doesn't fit neatly into any category at all. The way most people encounter their spirit guides is through meditation, dream work, journeying, or just moments of deep stillness where something suddenly feels very present. They tend not to show up dramatically. They tend to show up quietly at the edges. A repeated image, a feeling of being watched in a warm way, a sense that you turned the right direction for no logical reason. Working with spirit guides is less about ritual and more about relationship. You build it over time. You learn to recognize how your guide communicates. You learn the difference between your own thoughts and the nudges that come from somewhere else. If you have not met your spirit guide yet, don't worry about it. They'll show up when you are ready and willing to receive their guidance. Now, ancestors. This is the work that feels the most immediate to me and the most underrated in modern witchcraft spaces. Your ancestors are, at the most basic level, the people who lived before you in your family line. And here's something I want you to really sit with. Every single one of your ancestors survived long enough to have children. That's not nothing. They crossed oceans, survived famines, buried their own children, started over more times than we will ever know. And they made it far enough to produce the chain that ends with you. That, my friend, is a reservoir of resilience that you can actually tap into. Working with ancestors doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as setting up a small ancestor altar. Photographs, objects that belong to them, a candle, maybe a glass of water or a food they loved, and just talking to them. Telling them about your life, asking them for guidance, sitting in the silence after and noticing what you feel. Now, and this is important, not all ancestors are ready to be worked with. Some of them had their own unhealed wounds, their own shadows, their own things they passed down the line that you're still working through. You don't have to work with the difficult ones. You can specifically call in your healed ancestors, the ones that have done their own work on the other side, who come with love and not with damage or harsh judgment. This is where we begin to resolve generational trauma. And as I mentioned before, you don't have to be biologically related to your ancestors in order to work with them. You can work with the ancestors of a land, of a tradition, of a craft. If you've been practicing a particular form of magic for years, the people who developed and carried that magic before you are, in a very real sense, your ancestors too. Okay, the big question. The reason you clicked on this video. Nope. You don't. Full stop. There is no deity, spirit guide, or ancestor that you are required to engage with in order to be a valid practitioner of witchcraft, paganism, or any related path. Plenty of witches are, like me, atheist or non-theistic. They work with energy, with intention, with the natural world, and their practice is full and meaningful and real. The absence of a patron deity does not create a whole. It just creates a different shape. That said, here's the nuance. I do think most people benefit from some form of relationship with something larger than themselves. Personally, that is the reason that religion exists at its very core. Whether that is a deity, an ancestor, a spirit of place, or just the sense of the universe as a living thing you're in conversation with. This work opens you up. It gives your practice depth and reciprocity. It moves it from a solo project into something more like a relationship. So here's the question I'd actually invite you to sit with. Not, do I have to? But what am I drawn to? And what is getting in the way? If you feel a pull toward working with a deity, but you're scared of doing it wrong, start small. Light a candle. Pull a card. Say a name. See what happens. If you feel connected to your ancestors, but don't know how to approach it, put a photograph on your altar. Pour them a glass of water. Say thank you. At Samhain, host a dumb supper and see who reaches out. And if you need a refresher on the dumb supper, go back and rewatch my video on Samhain. I'll leave a link to it in the description. If you genuinely don't feel called to any of this and your practice feels complete without it, trust that. Not every path looks the same. All right, friends, that's been enough for today. Deities, spirit guides, ancestors. 3 different categories, 3 different kinds of relationships, and none of them are mandatory. But all of them potentially meaningful if you are open to exploring what that looks like for you. As always, if you have thoughts, questions, or you want to share who you work with and why, drop it in the comments. I genuinely would love to hear it. It genuinely interests me. As always, every accusation is a confession. Free Palestine. Protect the First Amendment. This is a big one. Justice for Casey Goodson Jr. And do not let up on the Epstein files. Survivors deserve justice. Until next week, friends, take care of yourselves and each other.